Our next speaker is Jeff Morgan. Jeff is an architect, a senior associate at Hassell Studios, and as an architect with an international resume and a passion for sustainable aluminium. Really looking forward to hearing his talk. And so, Jeff, can I hand over to you, please?
Well, thank you very much, Hudson and Monica. So I'm Jeff Morgan. I'm a senior associate at Hassell in our Sydney studio. And I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to talk about my experience and I suppose an odd passion for aluminium in the construction industry. I guess our logo shown here on the screen is a little confusing in this particular context, but I'm not here to talk about hydrogen today, which might be an equally interesting discussion. But in fact, I would like to share my journey with low carbon aluminium. So I'm sure most of you are aware of the enormous contribution the built environment makes to our global CO2 emissions, approximately 40% through building operations, materials, and construction. But as we've just been hearing from Margie, as our grids decarbonize and hopefully at an increasing pace, the impact of embodied carbon will have on our sector emissions will become increasingly important to address. Sorry, just trying to get to the next slide. Sorry, 1 second, it's frozen. Try again. There we go. So when we think of the primary materials we use in the construction industry of cement, steel, and aluminium, there really is a huge opportunity, as noted by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, to reduce our global emissions by up to 40%. Through addressing the production, consumption, and reuse of these primary materials in a circular economy. My own journey with low carbon aluminium began approximately 12 years ago when I completed a project where we developed the world's first structural facade extrusions from recycled aluminium. I was working on the Masdar Institute in Abu Dhabi, part of the Masdar City Master Plan developed by Foster & Partners, where I was working at the time. Masdar City was a hugely ambitious project. I'll admit the idea of developing a carbon neutral zero waste city for 40,000 inhabitants in the middle of the desert was a bit mad in some respects, but it certainly fueled a great degree of innovation. One example of which was the development and use of recycled aluminium for the structural facade extrusions. After speaking with Ashley at Corio recently, I reflected on how this innovation came about. Masdar was a very large, wealthy company with a commitment to sustainability and delivering their first project, the Masdar City. They sought a strategic alliance with many partners on many issues, but in this case, Alcoa recognized the opportunity, and they partnered with Masdar and a smaller aluminium recycler in Belgium called EMEX to develop the recycled alloy that was suitable for the extrusions. And I think it's this sort of strategic alignment between end users or clients and the producers or suppliers that, at the right scale can really bring about a shift change in the industry. So fast forwarding to now, I was lucky enough to win a design competition with the rest of the team at Hassell for Stockland's new development at 110 Walker Street in North Sydney just over a year ago. The design during the competition was just after the kind of horrific summer of bushfires of 2019 and 2020. And the deep and embedded commitment to sustainability and Stockland's brief was really an inspiration for the project. I began asking colleagues in the industry about the potential use of recycled aluminium in the facades, particularly for the extrusions. And to my great surprise and disappointment, I was met with a lot of very odd and confused looks. But when we got into it, we took the opportunity to demonstrate the opportunity, for a low carbon recycled aluminium and what that could deliver on a typical curtain wall. We worked with Arab facade and ESD teams to calculate the reduction in a typical facade panel for the project. And not surprisingly, aluminum's embodied carbon contribution to those typical panels contributed overwhelmingly to its total. As you can see to the graphs that I'm displaying now, 3 different variations of basically different finishing materials, but the blue represents the reduction in carbon of approximately 88% when we use a recycled product like EMEX's Eco Billet. But Buildings are conceived, designed, and delivered by a complex ecosystem of clients, architects, engineers, contractors, and manufacturers. And I like to think somehow that architects sit in the middle of this ecosystem, navigating the various drivers and challenges to try and achieve, a desired outcome. And thinking back to Masdar, it was the alignment between the client, which was quasi-government in this case, and the supplier that brought about this change. And in the Australian current kind of construction context, I know Ashley would agree this same strategic alignment would certainly help instigate a market change. But as I've highlighted here on this slide, we really also need to look at where the majority of our facades are being made and what impact that has on our ability as an industry to bring about this change. Now, this is by no means a scientific study, but I am in the process of validating my hunch, which is that nearly all major commercial facades completed within the Sydney CBD since 2010 have been fabricated outside of Australia, and most of those in China. So if as an industry we want to make meaningful impacts into reducing embodied carbon, then we must rethink our current status quo for procurement. Unfortunately, this is not an issue only of aluminium and facades, but many of the products that we use in buildings come from overseas. Now, I won't pretend to talk about any of this to anywhere near the expertise that Margie just did, but I thought it was interesting to reflect in another context. So if we turn to the primary aluminium industry in Australia, you won't be surprised to know, as she said, that we are the world's largest producer of bauxite, the world's largest exporter of alumina, and the world's second largest producer of alumina. And as she quite intricately pointed out, our mines, refineries, and smelters are dotted around the country and are currently contributing quite heavily to the linear economy, and mostly powered by fossil fuels, although we are welcoming the grid's decarbonization. When we talk about recycling aluminium, we are not, however, currently as successful in this portion of the industry. I recently spoke with the head of sustainability from Hydro Aluminium in Norway, who told me that they buy a considerable proportion of their product from pre-consumer scrap from Australia for their own recycled product. It's obviously a bit of a shame that we're selling off this highly valuable asset overseas and not currently using it locally as much as we could. But it is fascinating and encouraging to know that approximately 75% of all aluminium ever produced is still in use today, and it can be endlessly recycled without compromising its quality. So there is certainly a great advantage in transitioning to a circular economy and thinking about the use of recycled aluminium. But when we compare this to our primary industry, our secondary recycling industry is far less advanced. So it is possible now to buy virgin low carbon aluminium from Rio Tinto via their renewal product. The embodied carbon is lowered through the use of hydroelectricity to power their smelters, and it's similar in its carbon impact to Hydro's reductive product. What's stopping us from buying and specifying this now in the construction industry? I'm not quite sure yet, but I'm sure that through MECLA, we'll find out. And looking abroad, I've talked earlier about EcoMax and their recycled billet produced by Emax, but conversations with them, they're currently reluctant to supply outside the EU. Hydro's recycled aluminium Circal recently reached a milestone in Europe, as it had been used in over 100 buildings in the past several years. But again, procuring this product has its challenges currently. And so to conclude, I guess I'm really filled with both lots of questions like, when can we see a low carbon product used in Australia in the construction industry, and what will it really take to unlock that transition? But I'm also filled with a tremendous amount of optimism and really looking forward to the work of MECLA ahead in bringing about this change. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. That was terrific. It's great having an architect and an architecture firm like Hassell, as well as the Australian Institute of Architects. I am not going to let you away from sitting in the middle of that ecosystem to keep us all honest now. So thank you for identifying that role, and also some of the existing lower emission alternatives, the Emax, the Hydro products elsewhere. And I think that gives us hope that that can be done here at some stage. And the fact that you have the data to say, look, I wanted to do that here and couldn't at the moment, and then could show where facades have come from for the rest of the Sydney CBD in that case study. Very interesting to hear, real world up-to-date market intel. So Jeff, thank you for your insights there. Looking forward to your participation in the conversation to follow.
Thank you.